Hi, everyone. Welcome to the REFSIX weekly podcast. Today, we're going to be joined by Roger Goodgroves, who's a British American football referee. We're going to be talking about what American football officials do and relating, obviously, to the fact that the Super Bowl happened this weekend and the GOAT Tom Brady won yet another Super Bowl ring. What we just did want to touch on before we go into that is a few things in terms of news. So you'd have seen that there was an incident with Mike Dean whereby he gave a red card to Thomas Soucek in the West Ham Fulham game. And there was some death threats sent to Mike Dean and his family. One, we just want to say that we think that's absolutely disgraceful. And we wish all the best to Mike Dean and his family. We're hoping and we're really proud to see that the Referees Association, one of our partners, is been able to share their message to say how disappointed they are that this behavior is there. And I think along with other organizations out there, we'd love to see some of these social media channels really take note of some of the tone that's being shared amongst players and referees in football. It needs to be cracked down on. So great to see that one of our partners, the Referees Association, coming out and deploring that behavior. The other thing that you would have noticed in the West Ham Man U game in the FA Cup this week was the first ever, at least in England, substitution for concussion. So that's something that's being trialled in a few of the elite competitions now. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But I won't talk too much longer. I'm just going to get straight into the podcast with John, myself, and Roger Goodgroves, who's the Director of Operations at BAFRA, the British British American Football Referees Association. And we're going to talk about American football officiating. Hi, Roger. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Recovering.
Yeah. Oh, it was probably a late night for you this weekend watching the.
Yes. A few late night or a few late weekends going up to it.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So, Roger, you are the Director of Operations. Well, let me not introduce you. You introduce yourself and your roles and all the things that you do.
Okay. I have a number of hats. I am the Director of Operations for the British American Football Referees Association. Primary responsibility in that role is to assign the crews to games. So basically, which referees and the other positions on the field go to which teams each week. Part of that role, we also provide the chain crew for the NFL when they come over for the London games. So I assign the chain crews for those games, and we have a number of assistants that help at the games on the sideline. I'm also a moderator for the NFL UK Facebook group, and I'm a photographer. So when I'm not working the games at London, I shoot the games from a photography point of view.
That's brilliant. Thanks for joining us today and talking about. I told you before we're a football podcast. We look at the refereeing side, but because of the Super Bowl the past weekend, we thought why not reach out and learn about a new sport. So it'd be great to kind of understand how you specifically fell in love with American football and your kind of genesis story when it came to officiating in American football.
Okay, I'll do it briefly. It goes back a long way. I first saw American football on a program called World of Sport, which was a Saturday afternoon program on ITV many years ago. And they showed a 15-minute highlights program of the Super Bowl once a year. And I used to love watching it, but didn't understand anything that was going on. It was all too quick. I didn't have any basis of the rules, but it looked great. I then was a rugby player. I then moved from up north, which was where I was playing rugby league, to down south, and they had no rugby league. At the same time, they started having an American football team in Northampton, which was where I was living. So I joined the team, became a player for many years, then coached. I had a few years off when I had family, and then when I came back to it, of course, I'm older. Not quite as fit as I used to be, and therefore came back in the refereeing point of view, which was a little bit related to my team days, because when I was on a team, I was the rules expert. Of course, what I thought was a rules expert at the time, realised when I started getting into the rule book how little I knew, but that's common.
No, brilliant. And how long have you been refereeing?
Yeah, no, that's great.
About 8 years now.
Okay, great. Cool.
Sorry, John, did you have a question?
Yeah, following on to that. Yeah, I do have a question. So I watched it on Sunday with my mate, and he is obviously a know-it-all. But my question to him, which he didn't have the answer to, was what are the different roles? There seems to be a lot of different referees with different coloured hats. Do you want to just explain? Because obviously
Yeah,
for us,
sure.
it's quite simple. We've got a fourth
I
man,
think
two linos, and a ref.
Yeah, this is one of the primary differences in officiating American football compared to football soccer, which is, although there is a nominated referee, all the officials, and there are 7 on the field at any one time, have the same level of responsibility. The only difference with the referee is they do the announcements to the crowd and they do the primary communication with the coaches. But in terms of what fouls are called, then all the other officials have the same level of responsibility, and they line up in different places in order to see different aspects of the play. And I think what separates why you need 7 officials in American football is the way that the game is played. It is predominantly a contact sport where every person on the game on every down will be involved in some sort of contact. So there's a lot to watch, and that's why you have so many referees. And they're all watching in different areas because there's linemen, the big heavy guys in the middle that are doing things. The quarterback, who is the sort of general of the team, he's coordinating things and he's watched by the referee. And then you have officials downfield looking for passes that might go 30, 40 yards downfield. And you need to be right on top of it to get a good view.
No, brilliant. So when you're training to be an official, do you train for one of the specific roles, or are you meant to be a kind of a generalist and be able to do all of them?
Well, I'll put my operations hat on. I like all the officials to be able to do all of the roles, which means when I'm assigning a game, I haven't got to think, oh, hell, I'm short of a line judge here. I've got to bring somebody 100 miles to do that game. I'd like to think, well, I've got somebody that's 10 miles down the road who normally does this position, but they'll do line judge if I need them to. So people generally do special. I know for myself, I am a line of scrimmage official. So there's basically somebody on each touchline looking at the line of scrimmage as they actually play out. And that's my preferred role. Mm-hmm. But I will go in anywhere that needs me, except referee. And that's not through want of choice. I have assigned myself to referee a number of times. And every time I assign the game, for some reason, it gets called off. So I'm just a jinx. So...
And so what about you mentioned that as the different roles, they're all equal to some degree, what happens if there's a disagreement, or they both see something slightly differently? How does that get resolved?
That can happen quite a lot because, and it is a good thing. And one thing I think in American football they actually are very good at, which is they are looking at the play from different angles. Now, if 2 officials have a view on the play, they might come together to discuss it and then say, well, I saw early contact on this receiver, therefore it's pass interference. The other official might say, well, the ball was clearly overthrown, so it shouldn't be pass interference. And normally the 2 officials will come to an agreement between them about, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't throw that one, or yes, it should be a foul. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if it comes to it, the referee will really come in and start asking the pertinent questions to try and get to it. But at the end of the day, if the person that's thrown the flag is convinced that it's still a flag, then it will remain a flag. But obviously the other officials will try and talk them off it if they've seen something different. And that's a good thing, I think.
That's really interesting.
That's right. The game goes on for a good amount of time, doesn't it? Like, how do you keep yourself on that line? Like you say, you're looking at the line. Could you keep focused for that long?
Yeah, it's typically, depending on the game, whether it's professional or not. Obviously, they have far more adverts in America. Their games tend to go on longer than ours do. But even so, it's a stop-start game. And use that stop-start to give yourself a moment to rest between plays. So it's case of refocusing. So not that you're not doing anything in between the downs, you've got a lot of officiating to do to make sure there's no off the ball incidents, make sure you've counted the players on each down, playing with too many, that sort of thing, checking out their formations. But it is a momentary downtime where the concentration levels aren't as much. And therefore you sort of go, right, breathe in, right, now refocus for the beginning of the play. Keep that going.
And in terms of fitness, right? Because you mentioned is short kind of bursts.
Yeah, stop start.
Yeah, stop start. That was the word. Yeah, exactly. How do you guys train? Are you literally just trying to get the speed in, the sprinting in, or what do you focus on from a fitness perspective?
No, to be honest, I think this is one advantage of American football. It is because of its stop-start nature, and because of the positioning of the officials more on the field. You tend not to move as much as you would do, let's say, in a soccer officiating. You're not having to keep up with the play so much. There is obviously a level of fish you need to keep up. It's not as intense. It's certainly not as intense as, let's say, rugby league official who's constantly moving backwards and forwards to the ball and coming off to mark where offside is. That's a far greater level of fitness than is needed for American football, which is a good thing. As I get older, I realise that standing still and officiating is a better way of doing it. Two reasons. One is because I'm not as fit as I used to be. But secondly, you can see much better if you're standing still. If you're on the move, is moving and your brain trying to adjust to the vision changes means you don't see as clearly. So ideally at the key intersections, you should be still. So the key is to get yourself to the position you need to be able to see and then stop. Then carry on moving once the play moves on.
Wonderful. What does a typical week look like for you then? Like in the terms of like prepping from the games on a Sunday, I'm assuming. And so you start Monday and then obviously game Sunday. Like what does that look like? Do you do a lot of analysis?
Yeah, and it's an amateur sport in the UK, so we haven't got the same level of intensity they do in the US. So I'll compare the two just to give you an idea. In the UK game, there's not much that goes on during the week. Generally, we will have regional meetings where we discuss rule applications, discuss plays on video and talk through things. And then the crew will be in contact with the teams during the week in order to make sure that the venue's the same one that we think we're playing at, that game is set for the time we think it is and that sort of thing, and all the medical requirements are set. But during weeks there isn't too much from the amateur's perspective. We get there typically an hour and a half before the kickoff. We have our own pre-game meeting, then we'll check the pitch, we'll talk to the coaches, make sure that medical's arrived, make sure that they've sent all the documents they need to do from a safety point of view, and then we'll get out on the field typically about 20-25 minutes before the kickoff.
Do you do a warm-up? I know.
Yeah, each us do our own warm-up. There's no specific warm-up. Generally, you'll find that we're warming up. Stretching more is important than anything else. It's stretching out, because obviously a sudden burst stop-start play, that's when you can tweak the hamstring and things like this. So stretching is far more important than anything else in it. And each individual will be generally warming up in the change room while we're chatting about the game coming up.
Oh, brilliant. So you mentioned obviously the sport here is still very much an amateur sport. How can you give us a sense of how big it is in terms of teams and
yeah, I mean,
etc.?
University teams, there are something like 80 or 90 university teams. They play typically October, November through to March. And the City League, there's about 60 to 70 teams in that, and they play April through to August time. And there's also under 17s, under 19s, and a very thriving women's game as well. It's a mixed league, both at university and City League. So there are women that play in the men's game, so to speak. But they also have their own league, and that's becoming more prominent as more women are taking up the game.
That's brilliant. And how many officials are there in England or in the UK?
We've got just under 200 in our association, which covers the mainland UK.
Yeah, and so I guess they're busy then with the amount of games that go on.
Yeah, that is one challenge I think all officiating faces, which is the more games there are than the officials are available, and luckily, there's a lot more respect, I think, in American football than some other sports. And so we don't get the hassle that a lot of sports get. And it's a lot easier to retain our officials. They're not getting abuse from the players. They're far more respectful. So that's a good thing.
So why do you think that is?
I think, if I'm guessing, and it would be a guess, two things. I think there's a general culture of respect to the officials. It's like inbuilt into the game. But I think the other thing, and I think rugby shares the same similarity in this respect, is that it is a game of yardage. And if you get penalised 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct, Ben, something you said to a referee, your team is going backwards. And if you have to get 10 yards and you've now got to get 25, that's a big step up. So, I think from that point of view, it soon gets clamped down on if there is some dissent, because your teammates and your coaches are on your back. So I think that's the predominant reason. Same with rugby, losing yardage, and that soon hurts. So,
yeah. Go on, John.
I was going to say, speaking on like that, the whole dissent thing, do you have a lot of interaction with the players, or do you spend a lot of time more with is it more coach dominant based, or?
It depends on what position you are on the field. The ones on the field, like the umpire who's in the middle of the pack, so to speak, and the referee, they have far more interaction with the players that are on the field. Out on wings, probably I have more conversations with the coaches, both head coach and assistant coaches, and I'm helping them to make sure that they don't foul. So I'm warning them that they've got a player who's encroaching, he really needs to get back, and it's not quite right. I'll give them warning rather than penalise them. If there's something blatant, then you have to call it. But it's much better to have positive officiating, where you're trying to get them to do what you want rather than to enforce it with the flag.
Oh, brilliant. And then in terms of, so in American football, there is no yellow and red cards, right? So the flag is there.
Not quite.
Okay, go for it. Tell me.
We do have the equivalent. So in American football, you have unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, which are basically similar type fouls. And if you have two unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, that is the equivalent of a red card. So imagine it like a yellow card. That's the same. Now, we also have automatic disqualification for certain fouls. And there is a foul called targeting, which is basically when you're using the helmet to attack somebody. That is an automatic disqualification. There are certain conditions around it, but generally speaking, if you attack somebody who is vulnerable in the head and neck area, then you can be sent off.
And does the team play a man down, or does that player can't partake?
No, with American football, there is a squad size of 40 or 50 players, and it basically means that player can no longer play, and he may be a good player for your team, but somebody else can come in, so you're still playing with 11.
Yeah, no, brilliant. No, interesting.
Unlimited substitutions.
Yeah. So as an official, so we as referees and those who use our app REFSIX will have to make a load of notes during the game on, yellow, who gets cards and goals, etc. Is there a separate role for that in the official team, or does everyone have to keep track of everything?
Everyone has to do it. There are certain different requirements. So, for example, everybody has to know at the end of a quarter what down it is, what distance still to go, etc., what yard line they're at, and that's a mandatory requirement for everybody to note at the end of the quarter. Everybody also has to monitor their own fouls. So, for example, if I throw a flag, I need to make a note of what time it was when I threw that flag, what the flag was for, whether it was accepted or declined, whether it was on the offence or the defence, etc. In addition, because of the nature of the unsportsmanlike conduct type fouls, then everybody needs to make a note of those. If there's a yellow card on number 29 on the blue team, then everybody needs to know that. So that if there is another one, then he is sent off, and everybody needs to know that he's going to be sent off as a result, including the coaches, obviously, that he's on a yellow.
Oh, brilliant.
That's quite interesting. I've got a question that's been quite relevant to the football recently. Concussion substitutions have just obviously been made relevant to the Premier League, and obviously the NFL have had that for I think quite some time now. Like, is that a responsibility of you to check for the concussion or see if a player is concussed? Or I know you mentioned that there's a lot of medical staff there. Is it more their sort of job to notice the player is concussed, or do you have a hand in that?
Yeah, we have a hand in it. We're not medically trained, and therefore we can't assess somebody whether or not they are concussed or not. That's not our role. However, we do have a responsibility to ensure that if we see signs of concussion, so somebody's unsteady on their feet, doesn't seem to know where they are, then we need to bring it to the attention of the medics. So we will send somebody out of the game to be assessed by the medics. And it is only when the medics say that they can come back in, they're allowed back on the field. So yes, we have a responsibility, but it's not a direct responsibility to assess the concussion.
No. Yeah, that just happened. I think the first one happened this week in the FA Cup, West Ham, Man U. So it's interesting because a lot of debate in football is to do with, basically what's happened in football is if there is a concussion, they can make an extra substitution, which I guess isn't. So people are worried that, okay, some people may fake it or use it to their advantage. But I guess in American football, because there is unlimited substitutions, there is actually no real benefit there.
Indeed.
To be involved. Yeah.
And in the NFL, they actually have medical trained doctors, basically, at stadium who are spotting for signs of concussion. So they will call down from the stands to say number 29 needs to be assessed, and they'll take them for concussion protocol assessment. And they're independent of any of the teams, so they have it very tight. Necessarily, the NFL paid a large number of fines to players who were suffering with concussion because things weren't done about it. It's a very contact sport. People think, it's a sissy's version of rugby. I've played both, so I'm really in a good position to say what the differences are, which is it's a little bit like when you walk in as a pedestrian, you're very vulnerable to the cars that are around you. If you're in a car with a nice hard shell around you, you feel a little bit less vulnerable. And it's a little bit like that when people put on helmets and pads. You are more protected, and therefore you tendency to do things with your body that you wouldn't otherwise do, and be a bit more reckless with where you might stick your head in. And that one different. The rules have changed over the years as well with American football to highlight the dangers of concussion. And we know from studies that hitting with the helmet directly on is as much danger to the person who hits, as in the person who's doing the hitting, as it is to the person that is being hit. It's that neck compression that can cause paralysis. So both that aspect of it is the person will be sent off their own protection if they're doing that, but also potentially if a person's in the process of catching a pass, their concentration level isn't on the hit that they're just going to get, and therefore they get some extra level of protection for their head and neck area. So that's the other area that's been a lot clamped down on at all levels.
And it seems like a lot of the fouls are obviously there to protect the players, right? A lot of the infractions are so obviously some are for tactical reasons, but a lot of it's for protection. How often do the rules get changed? Is it quite frequently?
Every year there's small adjustments. Generally they do a 2-year cycle of major changes, and then anything that's introduced in the non-major change year is normally a safety issue. So they're clamping down in a particular area of safety. But 2-year cycle of rule changes is typical.
And with the British referees, are you following, is there a world governing body, or are you creating your own rules, or are you bringing it from America? How does it work in that sense?
Yeah. So in America, let's just take America. There are predominantly 3 levels of football. There is the NFL, which is the professional levels. There's college sports. Now, college in America is huge. In fact, attendance at college games can be bigger than attendance at NFL games. It's not untypical to have 90 or 100,000 people at a college game in America. Now, in the UK, we follow the college rule system, which is slightly different to the NFL, only minorly. So, for example, you only need 1 foot inbound to catch a pass, where it's 2 in the NFL. There are predominant areas of difference, really. So they are minorly different. We then tweak slightly for the level of play over here. So we have the NCAA's college system. So we have their rule book, and then we have the International Federation of American Football, which takes the NCAA rules and adds a few minor tweaks for international. So there is an international governing body, International Federation of American Football, who are responsible for updating that rule book and decide if the rule should be followed and there should be a mirroring, or whether we take our own course. And we have led in some areas where we've put in a rule internationally that has then been followed at college later.
That's really interesting. The other thing that is where the NFL has been leading, or has definitely led football, is around technology, right? So at least what I've seen in America, there's three major things that that's there. Obviously, there's a communication kit between the officials. There is the communication kit with the crowd and the audience, which we definitely should focus on, because that may be something that could come into play in football. But then there's the whole video replay and stuff like that. Can you just talk us through some of that technology, and also talk about how that does any of that technology get used here either? So it'd be interesting in both of those.
Yeah, we have crew-to-crew communications on nearly all of our games in the UK. The technology is dead cheap. It's like £15 a person, and it really helps. Years in the UK, we're not playing huge stadiums like we are in the States, and therefore the game clock is being run by one of the officials. So it's very useful to be able to communicate what the game clock is at any other time between officials. They also have communication to the players on the pitch. That doesn't happen all the time. There is cut-off limits on when those communications finish. So 15 seconds before the beginning of the next play, it gets cut off automatically. In the NFL. And in terms of replay, we don't have much replay in the UK or in international games, again, because just the money is not there to have extra TV cameras. Mm-hmm. But we do have it occasionally for our finals. Mm-hmm. And I've actually been trained with the NCAA replay, a guy called Dean Blandino, who was the former head of the NFL referees. He's now head of replay for the NCAA, and I attended sessions with him during the winter season just gone. And it is a much better technology than what soccer has in terms of what it's allowed to do, what it's see. But I think is also one key difference is the American system of TV sets up far better ability to be able to rule on it from a video than some of what I've seen in the UK. So I think that's the other key difference. And in the college system, they can intervene on pretty much anything. If it's a major issue, they can buzz down and say, no, we need to bring that one back. That wasn't the catch, even though that was what was ruled on the field. So if it's a major difference, they'll let minor things go, but any major area of yardage gained or lost, etc., turnovers, that sort of thing, are automatically reviewed.
Yeah. So do they become, again, that's the, I guess that's the interesting thing in that sense, that will the person on the field go and review what if the person upstairs says, hey, you should, I don't think that's the case, we need to change this. Does that just get done, or do they go and review it first?
Different levels, different things. So the NFL, they have a central command center, so that there is a replay official at the stadium, but they will also be working with the people in New York to review the film. And they will, generally speaking, say what happened and then send that information down and show the referee on the field what they saw on video and come to an agreement, basically, that was what happened and it should be changed. In the NCAA system, slightly different in that the replay official will buzz down and say that they think there's an issue, stop, review the tape, and then they get the referee involved to show what they've seen. Generally speaking, they'll go with the replay official because they've reviewed all the tape. What the replay official will be doing is having a look at the variety of different angles that exist, choosing the video that shows that best, and then showing that to the referee and say, look, we've got this angle that clearly shows his foot out of bounds before he got into the end zone. Therefore, we're going to bring that one back.
Oh, cool.
I find it hard to grasp how many teams there are. So do you have to travel a lot? Because obviously, there are a lot of teams and not a lot of officials. So do you? Yeah,
we generally put out something in the region of 22 to 25 crews a week. To cover the games, and that generally will cover most of the league games scheduled on a weekend, except during the college season. Sometimes, because of the weather during the winter, some games will get postponed, etc., and they can get a backlog, and they might have 30 fixtures in a weekend or on a Sunday. So in terms of travelling, we do travel a little. But we try and keep travelling to sort of 50 to 75 miles maximum. And it depends where you live in the country. You know, the Scottish officials, just by geography, will often be doing far greater travelling than the officials in London, for example, who might only travel 5 or 10 miles.
It's interesting, in terms of the British side. So do you know if many of your officials are officiating other sports?
Yeah, there's a few crossovers with soccer and with rugby and with cricket. So there's a fair crossover. Some of our officials will only work during the summer season because they officiate soccer during the winter season. So there is a crossover. It's not huge, but there is quite a few people who are coming to us after officiating at soccer, fed up of the abuse that is the common thing I'm hearing, and they prefer the way that American football is officiated and respected.
Yeah, so I'm super intrigued by that. What do you think makes officials want to just what? Because for me, I love football, and the reason I referee it is because of my passion, right? So what are these people that are doing multiple sports? What's the trend that you see? Like, what do they just love the participating in the event of a game, or a skill set?
I think there's a variety.
Yeah.
Some, they love all the sports and they just want to be involved in those sports. Some just love officiating. It's a passion for making sure the game is fair. Mm-hmm. And I know when I used to play five-a-side soccer, I mean, I was the guy that was shouting out calls, fouls against my own team, and I was the on-field referee. Yeah. I suppose if it's in you, and you just want to have a fair game, and therefore you get involved.
So, because there's two questions I've got now. So, because you've just mentioned that some of the officials get the opportunity to be in the Wembley games, the Twickenham games, and in truth, 200 officials, it's a small pool to be there, right? Surely that's a really great pool to attract new officials.
Yeah, it is. And anybody who's an American football fan, to say you can be on pitch side in amongst the players, I mean, you get a better view than the players do because you're in front of the players. Yeah. And to see the game speed that close up is amazing. You can't really appreciate it, the size of the players, the speed of those players, until you're very close to them. And you see how quickly they cover ground. And then when you look at it at home, and like there was a call in the Super Bowl this last weekend that said there was a pass that there was a penalty called against the receiver trying to catch the pass. But somebody said, oh, well, he couldn't have called that pass. It was uncatchable. Therefore, the flag shouldn't have been put down. I know in American football how quickly they cover ground. So literally any small knock off them of their route will make a yard or two difference. So it doesn't take much before that pass is catchable. And unless you've seen that speed close up, it can be difficult looking at home to go, yeah, he never caught that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. So in terms of the last question I've got here around, just probably for people who are listening, is what is the process to become an official in the UK? How does someone get trained, and how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, so it's the British American Football Referees Association. So the abbreviation is BAFRA, BAFRA, BAFRA.info, the website you can go to have a look and get a little bit more information and apply. Now, in terms of the process, once you join up, you get assigned, a trainee gets assigned a mentor. So, for example, I've got a rookie that I'm training at the moment, and we have initiation training manual that we'll go through with them, covering off the various different positions. So it's a combination of rules knowledge, bringing them up to speed, but also positioning. So the mechanics are as important as the rules, making sure you're in the right position on that play to get the best view, make the call. If you're not in the right position, nearly always you're disadvantaged for making the call. And so that's as much as anything to do with it. And that's part of the training. Once they've gone through the initial training, they have to take a competency exam. That gives them insurance to come out on the field knowing what they're doing. That's when the real training starts. Because obviously there's one thing knowing the rules, there's another thing get in the right position to enforce the rules, but also seeing it at game speed. Very different from reading it in a book. Yeah. And so then you have to have a minimum of 10 games on the field experience before you become qualified. And so if you're good at those first 10 games, you'll qualify straight away. Sometimes it might take 15 before you get to that level when you're signed off by the director of training. Okay. Nowadays, we've introduced far more Zoom type training. So my training with my rookie, I haven't actually met him yet because it's all been through COVID. So we've been doing it over Zoom. Obviously, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, it allows you to do much more with video sharing and things like this. So it's not, it helps reach out to some distant remote areas. Like we've got officials in Aberdeen. Their nearest other official might be in Edinburgh, which is a huge distance. We in the south. Yeah. We wouldn't comprehend it. And trying to train new rookies in Aberdeen is hard if you don't have the ability to do it remotely.
Yeah. So I said that was my last question, but it's not.
You lied.
Yeah, no. I've had it in my head. Why is the kit black and white? What's the historic nature behind that? In football, referees can wear different coloured kits. So
yeah, a good question. I mean, I know long time ago they used to wear all white, like cricket type whites, and so I'm not quite sure when black and white stripes came in. So yeah, a good question. No,
okay,
Freud.
That's one for us to Google.
Prompt me on that.
Roger,
I'll look it up later.
Yeah, Roger, thanks so much for your time. Oh, go on, John. Go for it.
Oh, John's. Are there English officials like close to the NFL, or is there a way that they can get the NFL if you're an official? Because obviously that's the peak, isn't it? That's the pinnacle. Like for us, it's the one, and we all dream of it. Is there a way for like an English lad, for example, me, to potentially go over and do the NFL, or is it very American?
Yes, not easy, but there again, it wouldn't be easy to be at the top of any officiating pyramid, and it's not helped obviously because we haven't got the standard over here. Having said that, yes, there is the ability to go over there. We have, for example, in the UK, when you move up the ladder, you then take on international games, and so you get recruited by the International Federation, and we forward the people we think are good enough from the UK to be in international games. And the head of the international games is a former head of officials that did the biggest college game. So, he knows people. He also knows good officiating when he sees it. And so, yeah, he can put in a good word. And as I mentioned to you before, I'd been trained. In fact, I was offered a job doing replay for the NCAA. Unfortunately, couldn't take it because I couldn't get a visa. So one of the biggest problems is actually a visa to get working over there under Trump. Not so easy.
Well, hopefully that changes going forward. But
yeah, me too.
Thanks so much, Roger, for your time. For those who are interested, obviously, Roger mentioned the BAFRA is the organisation where you can look out and see and potentially join. But Roger, you also have your own podcast. It's entitled the Roger Goodgroves Officiating Podcast, where you talk about the key decisions from the NFL that weekend, and try and share what may be going through the officials' mind in those. It's very similar to what we do. So, Roger, thank you so much for giving us some time. It was really fascinating.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, guys.